This video was originally part of the video about Princess Knight and Stop Hibari, covering the more critical elements of both. It had to be cut because I was already straining my voice to the point of agony and couldn't bear to record any further. It actually got to the point where I was not only unintelligible, but actually brought to tears by just how painful it was. However, the decision to cut it had a lot of consequences. Namely, people were taking my call to examine old media critically and honestly, and interpreting it as accepting that it was a different time. That was the opposite of what I wanted people to take from it. So I took that segment and expanded on it for this video. I hope you enjoy. Okay, I've taken some antibiotics and enough painkillers to cause a second opioid crisis. Let's do this! Let's talk about a book called Gone with the Wind. Gone with the Wind was a romance novel released in 1936 that was, to put it bluntly, little more than white supremacist propaganda. It was a book that egregiously romanticized slavery, even as far as to give heroic characterizations to fucking Klan members, and was adapted into a film in 1939 that, when adjusted for inflation, is still the best-selling film ever made. God, that's grim fucking news. In the 21st century, whenever Gone with the Wind, the film, the book is thankfully obscure and forgotten, is re-released anywhere, there's a public debate about the merits of problematic media, about whether these things should no longer be shown or profited from. And the refrain from uncritical consumers is that these things were made at a different time, and it's unfair to criticize them based on modern day standards. I mean, it was only... Hang on, let me check. 75 years after the abolition of slavery. How could people have possibly known better? The notion here is that in 1939, everyone, yes, everyone, uncritically accepted the romanticizing of slavery, the uplifting of white supremacy, and goodness, where did these photos of protests in the 30s come from? Oh no, was this a lie the whole time? Okay, let's drop the sarcasm. The thing is that the book, Gone with the Wind, was popular. You don't just get a film adaptation in the 30s 3 years after the book comes out if you weren't. Which means it had plenty of time to be read and discussed by fucking everybody. And here's the thing about 1939 that for some of you I bet will blow your mind. Black people existed and had opinions of their own. And surprisingly, they didn't think a book that romanticized slavery and uplifted the Ku Klux Klan and pushed the myth of dignified slavery was all that good. And they made that opinion known. Hey, that's not a different time, that's today. I'll tell you what's going on. White people in the 30s, if you can believe it, didn't really give two shits about what black people had to say about anything. And so the people who got to control the narrative kinda just ignored them, which is kind of a running theme. Rocky Horror Picture Show is a fucking ghoulishly transmisogynistic piece of fucking garbage that in recent years has come under fire from trans people for showcasing every horrible thing TERFs believe about trans women. Oh wait, no, sorry, did I say recent years? I meant always. See, here's another shocking truth. Trans women existed in the 70s, and I know you know that because you all think the Stonewall riots were started by one. And surprise, surprise, didn't really much care for this kind of portrayal. But why do you never hear about that? Well, it's pretty simple. Cis gays didn't care. They just didn't fucking care. It was a film that had all the decadent fucking around and rape they could ever want, and they got to dance around to some shitty songs, which, as is still the case today, is the only thing some of us care about apparently.
That's right, I heard the story over and over again. Gee, it's swell to finally meet her other friends.
Trans people generally do not think highly of this film, or its adaptations, or its creator, who has routinely claimed that trans women can never be women. Oh gee, I wonder why Rocky Horror is so transphobic. Could it possibly be the openly transphobic creator? In fact, the only trans people I ever see defending it are the occasional millennial who has been Pavlov since 2013 by its status as an icon, despite nobody ever really explaining why it's an icon aside from the aforementioned terrible music and fucking. I covered Princess Knight in the last video, and one of the thing of note is that Princess Knight used a gender essentialist framework for a supposedly feminist message. But Princess Knight was criticized at the time by Japanese feminists for being misogynistic. That's why future Prince of the comic would have Sapphire permanently lose her male heart yet still be able to kick ass, because in previous Prince, he would lose it only temporarily and exhibit massive personality changes and be unable to fight. So to call Princess Knight fair for its day or a product of a different time is false. It was criticized back then, and the author responded to those criticisms with rewrites and republications. That's a good thing, by the way. And yet, this is something you could look up, you know, like it's on the Wikipedia page. Why is this here? When I discuss Stop Hibari, I indirectly compared it to the Family Guy episode Quagmire's Dad, because the two are the definitions of mixed bags. They both feature trans women who are just living their lives and aren't all that interested in your objections, and who are routinely mistreated by other characters who are frequently derided as unreasonable. But at the same time, the sheer degree of that mistreatment can't be ignored. There's a scene in the comic where Hibari's father threatens to murder her with a samurai sword because he's a member of the Yakuza, and the Yakuza are not really known for being sane, level-headed individuals. Hibari's father isn't a good person, but at the same time, it can't really be all that fun for trans viewers to see a trans girl's life threatened by an unhinged lunatic, because that happens every fucking day. Brian projectile vomiting for 30 seconds straight has always been very clearly the behavior of an asshole, who the show has always been unsubtle in reinforcing how much he is a fucking asshole. Even Stewie's looking at him like, dude, what the fuck? But trans women are frequently murdered by men who think they're trying to trap them. Hell, this is why trans women are frequently called traps by assholes. So despite these people being mocked, they are still very real and very dangerous to trans women. At the end of the day, these are very real dangers for trans women being played as a joke. Well-meaning or not, they aren't a joke, and you can look at this a lot of different ways. I, in fact, have positive feelings about Ida, just as I do have positive feelings about Hibari, but that fact, that looming fact that hangs over them, cannot just be ignored even if you come away from them with positive feelings. You can't just ignore those things. You can make fun of bigots until the cows come home, but you have to be aware that you are still making a joke out of very real violence. This idea of fair for its day is the opposite of what I wanted to talk about in the last video. I wanted to give these things a measured look. Admittedly, I wasn't able to because I just couldn't record any further, but it was something I encouraged people to do, and seeing some people just ignore that was practically infuriating. Here's the problem. When it comes to Gone with the Wind, the opinions of people of color are the only ones that matter. The opinions of white people on the topic of romanticizing slavery don't fucking matter. When it comes to Rocky Horror, the opinions of trans women are the only ones that matter. Nobody else's matters. Especially if your only attachment to it is the fucking music. If you need bad music for the gays so badly, Lil Nas X is right there and doesn't hate trans people and is lovely. But when you wash away all criticism with "it was a different time," you elevate people whose opinions don't matter as the only opinions to even exist. It's not even a matter of dismissing or even ignoring criticism, you're denying the very existence of that criticism. When you defend Gone with the Wind as fair for its day, you elevate the opinions of dipshit white people who either didn't know what people of color thought of this piece of dog shit, or more accurately, didn't care. It was a different time. No, it fucking wasn't. It wasn't a different time, because white people back then were being just as dismissive as you are now. It's just that back then the phrase was, who cares what them uppity think. The opinions of people of color were dismissed with brain-dead bullshit just like you're doing right now. The only thing that's changed is that the internet has made it so that criticism can exist in your vicinity whether you like it or not, and that's a problem for white people in fandom who are increasingly uncritical of the media they consume, and in some cases are hostile to criticism in the first place. I mean, this is a demographic that wishes the Jeffrey Dahmer series had more gore so they could enjoy the murder, dismemberment, and cannibalism of the very real gay men of color he murdered in all its grisly reality, so I imagine the concept of basic human empathy is completely alien to some of these fuckers. It's not hard to not be dismissive of criticism. There's this fake dilemma that exists in white LGBT spaces, because a lot of our quote-unquote representation is about as tarnished as you can get without devolving into full-blown rust, and most of it has aged poorly, and a lot of it was already spoiled when it came out. But when we talk about that, the discussion never goes anywhere productive. It just ends with this circular hand-wringing of, how do we deal? How do we approach problem critically? You approach it critically! I get it. Your English teacher once tried to get you to examine the concept of applicability by suggesting the color of the curtains means something, and you were too stupid to get the lesson and have been mauling about it ever since. But uncritically accepting bad shit with bad excuses and imagining that leftists want to burn everything problematic to the ground are not your only options. I love the Warcraft universe. I've loved it since I was a kid, and I am extremely critical about the fascist, misogynistic, hateful fucking direction the story has taken since Chris Metzen left. And frankly, it had its problems before then. I would not hesitate to beat the writers of WoW to death with a fucking rock because they are vile human beings who get off to the suffering of women and non-white people. If you watch my video about J.K. Rowling, you notice that I do still have positive feelings about Harry Potter, but it hasn't stopped me from mercilessly criticizing it, and J.K. Rowling could get the same rock. It's not hard to be an active, engaged viewer and think about what you consume, but that's not what this excuse is about. about. It's never been what it's about. It's exactly what it is on the tin. It's an excuse. You say Gone with the Wind was made in a different time because you like it, and engaging with the criticism might reveal unsavory things about yourself. You don't like the idea that the things you like might say something about you. You don't like the fact that other people are suggesting that you liking a movie uncritically might say something about how you view the themes the movie pushes and what you choose to not care about. So you make excuses to avoid thinking about it, because the idea that you might be problematic is, for some reason, too emotionally traumatizing for you to accept. You don't care, and you don't want people telling you why you don't care. So you have to ignore the criticism, and ignore the criticism that existed back in the 30s. You have to invent this fantasy that malicious people never existed, and the racism of the 30s wasn't the product of direct malice, but just innocent ignorance. White people didn't understand that being racist was bad back then. That's it. If it were made today, it would be different. Except it wouldn't be. Because just like in the 30s, you're sitting there looking at your phone wondering why all these uppity won't just shut up and learn their place and let you have your fun at their expense. Let me ask you a serious question. How do you think we got to the point where we can even make this excuse? How do you think we got from this
Behave yourself like a good girl should!
to this?
So, the head witch of the Bard Coven likes pretending to be a rebel. Too bad they're not very good at it.
Ada, you're embarrassing me in front of my crew.
How do you think we got from this
Hey, Jean.
to this?
Amity Blight, do you want to go out with me? Yes! Okay! Amity, I'm so glad my awesome girlfriend is okay.
Me too.
Hola, Batata. Did you just call me a sweet potato?
Yes, is that not a term of endearment?
Luz! I heard that... Spill it, hermosa! No monsters, no mysteries, no deadly duels. It's going to be the most mundane slice of life date ever. And it'll be awesome.
I know.
Oh, crikey.
I can't believe I just did that.
I can't believe I just said that!
It wasn't magic or some ill-fated destiny bullshit. It was pressure. It was criticism. It was the direct action of people who refused to settle for just being the butt of a joke, or to settle for crumbs, or to settle for someone's weird fetish material. But thought-terminating cliches like this are anti-criticism. They're excuses not to think, not to reflect, and reflecting is the value of problematic media. Reflecting and criticizing and learning how to be better is the reason we don't just burn every copy of Gone with the Wind and forget it ever existed. It's the reason old terrible films have inserts at the start reflecting on the horrid state of society at the time. And it's important especially because while things have improved, these problems haven't gone away. You remember old TV shows that trivialized brutalizing women to the point that it was clearly the writer's weird fetish? You know we're still doing that, right? Just a thought.